It started with a silence that made no sense. 2 children gone, beds empty, a quiet Nova Scotia community suddenly thrown into panic as the hours stretched on and the questions multiplied. Before we go any further, hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss first-hand updates on this story and others as they continue to unfold. What followed that first shocking realization was one of the most intense and emotionally charged missing children investigations in recent Canadian memory. 2 young siblings vanished from their family home in rural Nova Scotia, and from the very beginning, the case carried an unsettling mix of urgency, confusion, and heartbreak. Search teams moved quickly, scouring wooded areas, waterways, and nearby properties. Helicopters circled overhead, dogs traced scent trails, and hundreds of volunteers poured in from surrounding towns, driven by the same fear. That time was running out. Despite the massive scale of the search and the sheer number of resources committed, there was no sign of the children. No clothing, no footprints, no confirmed sightings. The absence of physical evidence only deepened the mystery and heightened public anxiety. For many watching from afar, it was impossible to understand how 2 children could simply vanish without leaving a trace, especially in a region that had been so thoroughly searched. In the early days, one figure became impossible to ignore: the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell. He was everywhere, speaking to reporters, appearing visibly emotional, and publicly pleading for help. Martell joined search efforts himself, walking alongside volunteers and positioning himself as a desperate parent willing to do anything to bring the children home. His appeals were emotional and direct, resonating with parents across the country who imagined themselves in the same nightmare. At the time, his visibility helped fuel public engagement with the search, encouraging more volunteers to step forward. Yet as weeks passed and hope began to fade, some began to scrutinize his role more closely. In missing person cases, especially involving children, intense public involvement by family members can be interpreted in many ways, either as genuine desperation or, in hindsight, as something more complicated. At that stage, however, Martell was still widely seen as a grieving stepfather clinging to hope. The children's mother briefly appeared before the media as well, offering limited comments that reflected shock and distress. Then, almost as suddenly as the children themselves had vanished, she disappeared from public view. Her absence raised new questions and fueled speculation, particularly as the case dragged on without answers. Some interpreted her silence as grief too heavy to carry in public, while others wondered whether there were deeper reasons behind her withdrawal. In high-profile cases, families often face unbearable pressure from both media and the public, and stepping back can be a way to survive emotionally. Still, the lack of visibility from both parents over time created a vacuum, one quickly filled by rumor, online theories, and increasingly polarized opinions. As the investigation continued, authorities remained tight-lipped. Police confirmed the scale of the search but offered few details about what they believed might have happened. Investigators acknowledged that no physical trace of the children had been found, despite exhaustive efforts. This lack of evidence became one of the most troubling aspects of the case. In many disappearances, even the smallest clue, a dropped shoe, a scrap of fabric, can provide direction. Here, there was nothing. That void frustrated investigators and devastated volunteers who had combed the same areas again and again, hoping not to find tragedy but desperate for any answer at all. Months later, Martell made another public claim that reignited attention. He said he had passed polygraph tests related to the investigation. The statement was quickly picked up and shared online, interpreted by some as proof of his innocence. But police never confirmed the claim, nor did they comment on whether any polygraph tests had been administered or what their results might have been. Experts were quick to point out that polygraph tests are not definitive tools and are often inadmissible in court. Still, the claim added another layer of complexity to an already tangled narrative, leaving the public unsure of what to believe and whom to trust. Then came a dramatic and deeply unsettling turn. New charges were laid against Daniel Martell, this time accusing him of sexual assault and forcible confinement involving an unrelated adult. The allegations were serious and immediately changed how many people viewed the case. Authorities were careful to stress that these charges were not directly linked to the disappearance of the children. Even so, the timing and nature of the accusations inevitably cast a shadow backward, prompting renewed scrutiny of Martell's earlier public role and statements. For a public already desperate for answers, the distinction between unrelated charges and the unresolved disappearance was difficult to separate emotionally. Further complicating matters, court records revealed prior domestic violence allegations involving the children's mother. These revelations added context that had not been widely known during the initial search and raised uncomfortable questions about the family's private life before the disappearance. While none of these allegations provided direct answers about what happened to the children, they painted a picture of instability that contrasted sharply with the image first presented to the public. Investigators have not said how or if these past issues factor into their ongoing work. Throughout all of this, online speculation exploded. With Canadian authorities releasing limited information, social media platforms became breeding ground for theories, some thoughtful, others reckless. Armchair detectives dissected every interview, every timeline discrepancy, and every rumor. While public interest helped keep the case alive, it also risked spreading misinformation and deepening the pain for those closest to the children. 9 months later, the case continues to draw international attention, not because of answers, but because of their absence. 2 children are still missing. Families, volunteers, and entire communities remain suspended in uncertainty. The investigation is ongoing, the new charges proceed through the courts, and the central question, what happened to those siblings, remains painfully unresolved. In the end, this case is a stark reminder of how quickly ordinary lives can fracture and how silence can be just as haunting as noise. It underscores the limits of even the most determined searches, the dangers of speculation in the absence of facts, and the enduring need for accountability and truth. Until those children are found or their fate is known, this story is not over, and neither is the responsibility to keep asking, carefully and compassionately, for answers.